Morning, councillors. Welcome to the meeting, and I declare the meeting for April 21st of April open. Can we be upstanding for the council prayer? Our Heavenly Father, we come before you conscious of all of the things that's happening in our community. We pray for our community, the families, neighbours and friends. We pray for all the people providing health support and care. Help us to look to you for guidance, and may we place our trust in you at this time. Father, help us to focus our attention and our care upon all who are most vulnerable and isolated amongst us. May we as community leaders mirror to others your love and care that you continue to provide to us all. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Members, we are all present, so I'll move to item 1.5, the minutes of the previous meeting, including confidential items for confirmation. These are the council meetings held on Tuesday, the 17th of March at 9 a.m. and the special council meeting held on Thursday, the 26th of March 2020 at 6:30 p.m. Someone move those minutes. Councillor De Vries moved and seconded. Councillor Haybeck. All those in favour? Carried. There are no matters arising from the previous minutes. So I'll move forward to item 9.9. This item is a notice of motion that's been submitted by Councillor Wee Smith for Council to consider 0% rate increase for the 2020-21 in response to the COVID-19 and drought impact within our community. Now, members, we circulated yesterday was the thought of bringing forward an item, a question on notice that was submitted by Councillor Angus, that we deal with item 1.10 prior to dealing with the item 1.9. There is a recommendation there that the matter relating to council meeting on the 21st of April 2020, agenda item 1.1, question on notice from Councillor Angus, impact on nil rate increase for 2020 to 2021 be brought forward for discussion immediately. Councillor Wee Smith. Thank you, and seconded Councillor De Vries. Don't think there's any further need for any clarification. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Further recommendation that we need to move and second, taking into account bringing forward that item, a recommendation that council receive and note the response, and that the question and the response be placed in the minute book. Moved Councillor De Vries and seconded Councillor Troop. All those in favour? Carried. Members, as is in the reports, there is a series of questions that we need to consider and have some discussion. And so it has been as a recommendation before you for the suspension of proceedings, and the recommendation is that council procedures and meeting regulations so that council and officers can discuss the policy response and discuss the questions outlined in the Chief Executive Officer's comments in the agenda items 1.9 and 1.10, and provide further direction to the Chief Executive Officer on how to frame the budget and business plan to achieve 0% base budget. The suspension shall cease at the conclusion of the discussion or in 30 minutes' time, whichever occurs first.
Move that way.
Moved by Councillor Johnston, and I've seen Councillor De Vries with his hand up. Seconded, Councillor De Vries. No further need for clarification. All those in favour? Carried. Then we need to move into that next motion after we've had the discussion, members. So we'll commence the discussion and I'll cross to the CEO to give further explanation.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The question, just to clarify some of the figures in the report. So the way that the model currently works is a little bit very high level because obviously we don't exactly know what to model at this point in time. So those particular impacts are either based on whether you include growth, don't include growth, and have a 10-year compounding impact. So the things we need to have a little bit of a discussion about, so I can now frame the document quickly about what are we going to do with things like new initiatives, what are we going to do with our strategy long term. In the short term, the strategy should be, in my view, as simple as we'll just need to borrow some additional funds, our financials can do that, and then over the next 12 months have a look at how we claw back or how we reduce expenditures, review service levels. They're the sorts of things that you've got to have to think about. But the reality is that has a significant cash impact on our budget. We can absorb some of it, but you can't absorb all of it over 10 years without us having some other conversations about service levels, capital expenditure and other items. If we want to claw it back within a short period of time, the quickest way to do that is capital expenditure because it takes some time to unwind programs and other contracts that sit in our operating budgets. So I might just start with any questions.
Any questions from the chamber? Deputy Mayor Boothby?
So I think one of the significant unknowns that all councils have at the moment is what benefit of state and federal government stimulus packages there will be. Have they given you any time frames in terms of obviously either capital projects that we can bring forward and or get a greater percentage contribution to, and or any potential for funding of things like road maintenance that obviously can have a positive benefit on our budget position?
So as we've suspended meeting procedures, I won't go through you, Mayor, at this stage. There's two main programs at this point in time at a federal level that provide opportunity. The Barossa Council's done a huge amount of work over the years in positioning itself around the big project. We obviously have the first phase funded in the long-term plan. So the first is a general infrastructure bucket of $1 billion, but we're still trying to get to the bottom of exactly what that looks like. It's been announced, but the details haven't been announced, and that's primarily for the regions that have been highest impacted through tourism as well. Certainly that would position the Barossa area. It's not just a local government bucket, strongly in that space. The other main, we got correspondence from the Deputy Prime Minister about 4 weeks ago about bringing forward any road infrastructure projects. So we made a quick submission from that, and obviously I've circulated that data. They're the two main federal buckets that we're aware of at this point in time. In terms of availability for local government, there's many other stimulus and opportunities for business and impacted individuals as well. State government main program at this point in time was the doubling of the Open Spaces Fund. Remembering that any of these projects need to be able to hit the ground very quickly, so we had a couple ready to go. So we put together another application for Mount Pleasant and bring that forward. So there's 800,000 in the forward estimates every year, 80,000 every year to do Main Street works. We've obviously been focusing on Mount Pleasant and Angaston first, and The other one we put forward was some of the community components of the stock pool. The other programs, there are obviously other stimulus programs around the state with small businesses as well as their own infrastructure programs, hospitals, roads, etc., etc. I think there is an opportunity, but you're right, we don't know what that impact is. But we're already pushing into Canberra through our grant writer around that $1 billion fund and potentially releasing money for the big project or the Adelaide Capital's wine truck.
Councillor Hearn?
Question of Martin, if we could, in page 9, the third last paragraph, where you're talking about subdivisions, etc., how would that really make ratepayers subsidise that when surely they would, if you've got a block of land, you'd be rated on that? Could you just explain and elaborate on that a bit for me, please?
So it's simply a set of numbers. So if we have a zero rate increase, we're going to collect the same amount of rates that we've collected this year, but you're going to have more ratepayers because those that have just come on through subdivision will get a benefit as well, whereas previously they won't, if you don't include growth. Sorry, if you include growth.
But don't they still pay their rate, so we would collect more anyway?
If you don't include growth, yes. If you exclude growth, so in other words, if the rate freeze is for everything and you're only going to collect what you collect this year, those that are coming on stream this year will get a greater benefit than those that are paying last year.
So could we perhaps then get an opinion from the other councillors that we include growth?
No.
You'll do that as part of the debate.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Right.
Councillor Lee Smith and then Deputy Mayor Booth.
You've talked about how we may need to borrow some funds for this, but if we were, say, to perhaps reassess some of our capital expenditure, would that put us in a better position whereby we may not need to borrow funds?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the three levers that we can pull quickly are capital, borrowings, and some expenditures, because it does obviously take time to unwind operating expenditures because there are obviously contracts, employment relationships, etc. to manage. Borrowings and capital is absolutely the easiest way to manage the cash flow. We can model both those things. I guess my original position and thinking is to maintain current levels of service, we would need to borrow a little bit of extra money.
Deputy Mayor Boothby and then Councillor Johnston.
So just to clarify, so when we do debate these decisions this morning, in terms of the additional things we need to be able to give you some direction on, at a minimum would be things like new initiatives, actually making a determination today what we want to do in that space, and obviously that funding gap. But the future years, obviously, because there are so many unknowns, could that be something that we address, during the next sort of 12 months?
Absolutely. I think that's actually the better strategy. The better strategy is to maybe use a combination of capital and borrowings and just use those levers and don't throw more at the budget at this point in time and buy ourselves 8 to 12 months to have a look what all those impacts are, what does come through in stimulus funding, how long we are actually still going to be impacted, what recovery programs we need to put together, which I'm working on, to support our community and social aspects as well, just not our economic redevelopment. We just don't know those things at the moment. So absolutely, we need some firm directions on the sorts of models you want us to do around the cash flow management, and which is fundamentally, I agree, capital and borrowings. What we do with new initiatives, and then what we're doing for the next 8 to 12 months to claw this back.
Councillor Johnston.
I recall in our last meeting we made.
Just turn your mic.
Oh, sorry. We made alterations to our hardship policy reflecting the present situation I just wonder whether the Chief Executive could remind us what those operations were and succinctly, and to what extent we've already been asked to waive rates. And the follow-up question will be, will we need to borrow money to cover the shortfall, irrespective of whether we alter capital programs?
So the hardship policy provisions we made as soon as this hit was, in essence, to defer payment for up to 6 months. That's the current policy position. And that's for individuals, businesses and the like. We've had 48 applications at this point in time. Rates notices go out next week. There's obviously going to be a flyer in those rates notices. So we expect to have a better idea of what the true cash flow implications are in the next month. The second part of your question really goes to the same part, Councillor Wee-Smith. The very simple thing is there are many levers you can use. Well, there are 2 basic levers you can use, and we can model those 2 up very quickly. The ability of the current budget to absorb the impact is still an unknown because we don't know exactly how many are going to come through. The council has already authorised an additional 3 million in short-term borrowings to manage that 6-month cash flow. Our current gut feel, Mark and my current gut feel, is that's probably not going to be needed, but it's there if we do.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Miller?
Thanks, Mayor. Just a comment. As a conveyancer, I have dealt with lots of people over the last few years in settling properties. One question was asked of me on Friday. These people purchased a block of land, and it was, as of 30th of June previous year, one big piece. It is now 30 separate allotments. So in the course of settling, we allocated a percentage to each allotment for the rates that have been paid and did an adjustment accordingly. Their percentage was $83.10. The question was asked to me, if you freeze the rates, is that all I have to pay next year?
The simple answer to that is ultimately no, because obviously they will become a new rateable assessment on our books this year. The Valuer General will assign a valuation to it, and whatever rating you set will be applied to that particular property.
Subsequent question, and then Councillor De Vries. Yeah?
Thank you. Okay, second scenario that occurred yesterday. These people had purchased a block of land probably 2 years ago. They've been paying the minimum rate applicable. They've constructed a new house. However, the unfortunate walk out of my office as they walk past. Oh, that's fantastic. If my rates are going to stay the same this coming year, even though I've built a new house and moved into it the last 2 months. That's the interpretation of how people are reading this thing in the community at the present time. Can I have clarification on that one too, please?
It's exactly the same answer. So their valuation will change, and whatever rating you set, so if you set the same rates as you set this year, they'll pay that component. So
that's including growth in the spectrum of growth or no growth?
that's if you, sorry, let's change the language a smidge. That's if you go for a full general rate freeze. So, in other words, your growth component you wouldn't pick up either. So that's the 880 something thousand figure. 844, sorry.
Councillor De Vries?
Thanks, Your Worship. I was going to save a lot of this for the debate, but there's a couple of points that Councillor Miller's brought up that I think need clarification. Usually each year, as well as setting the rates, we also move between the various different sectors, which parts will take on a bigger burden than others. For example, there are times when we give relief to the rate growers, there are other times when we might give it to industry other, for example. Is this proposal that we're talking about allowing us to move between those sectors. So for example, if we feel that retail and tourism have been taking a particular hit, are we going to be able to, under this debate, shift it so that maybe they take less of a share of the total and that is picked up by the others? Or are we talking about just keeping those sectors locked into the percentages of the share that they were doing last year?
That's entirely again up to you as to how you distribute the load. That doesn't change because you will obviously set a rate across the 7 different rateable land uses. Remembering tourism is not a land use. So
I understand that,
yeah, but retail, commercial, winery, primary production, they're all yes. So the very short answer to that is yes, you will still be making the same decisions. You'll just be trying to come to a budget and a rate setting that doesn't increase the rates. So
okay, let's clarify that then.
Councillor Schilling and then Deputy Mayor Booth.
So Martin, can you just confirm what the options are in this proposal? We're talking about a full rate freeze. What are the other options? Like, can it be, like Councillor DeVries said, can you actually have some in and not others? Like, is that a prospect, or what are the levels that we can actually approve?
absolutely, Councillor Schilling, you can, in terms of setting rates and distributing rate burden, all those determinations are still there. So, and depends on what the movements in valuation are. We suspect that the movements in valuation are going to be very low. The ability to manage the rate settings is not diminished by this at all. So if you wanted to manage particular sectors, you can still use rebates, you can still use the other rating mechanisms that sit within the Act. So nothing of that changes. So for example, last year we set the rates, but then we also said primary production had been hit hard, so we put in an optional rebate for people to apply for if the rates had gone up by a significant amount. So that all still exists. Just remember, the more mechanisms you use, the greater administrative burden you're adding to ourselves and to those that may be seeking it.
Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Angus.
So to Councillor DeVries' point, it's something that I've had to think about as well. So what I'm aware of is, so Economy ID that we subscribe to for doing economic modelling are doing economic analysis for every one of the LGAs that contracts with them. That information will be available at the end of April, but it's not available yet, in terms of forecast economic impact by sector. But one sector that we obviously do know is going to be hurting more than normal are grape growers in terms of 2 years of drought, 2 years of small yield, and impacts of smoke taint from the bushfires in December, January. So is there any data coming in that can inform our discussion at this point, or is that a discussion that we'll only be able to have, say, in May and early June? So is there any information coming from RDA that can help us from the rates hardship applicants of those 48? Are there any themes in there that we need to be thinking about? Is there any information that we do have at the moment in terms of particular sector impact?
The short answer again to that is there's huge amounts of data in there, but I think it's still early in terms of understanding some of that impact. It's something I can do some research on when I'm doing, as I keep writing this recovery plan. And you alerted me to the Econ ID stuff yesterday, so I'll keep an eye out for that. And obviously we will get other data from BGWA as to yield, etc. shortly. So I've already asked them for that when it comes through. And obviously we'll have our own internal data in relation to what the valuations do and the impacts of that. So we have to move quick. So, you know, the reality is, and then the revised recommendation I issued for the debate under 1.9 is, I think we have to move quick. We have to still try to develop a budget that is doable by the end of June. To get to that point, we're going to have to move fast internally as well as with you guys. And this will be a moving beast over the next 12 months in any case.
Councillor Angus, and then I think Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Mayor. I think when I posed the question, perhaps I didn't realise quite how much more serious this pandemic would get, given it was over a month ago. It was, and the question was, what impact would this nil increase have? In my mind, there's no question we would exempt subdivisions, so we must include growth. No one can get a free ride when others are feeling a lot of pain. And the whole idea of this was actually to say to the world, governments are going into a great deal of debt to try and keep things afloat. There is no reason why the Barossa Council should just be pretending it's business as usual. We have to feel some heat as well, and maybe our community has to slow down the expectations of some of the projects that we've got on the books. And if that, but by the same token, we don't want to stop it. We just want to keep things going along. You know, if we can do it with no major loss of momentum, that would be good. I'm pretty horrified to see after 9 years what the impact, the cumulative impact is. So I'm very cautious about the track we follow from here on. But I do believe our ratepayers deserve to be treated with the utmost respect, and if we can afford to give them a break, then we should. But we do have to look further than 1 year, but we'll be judged by our actions. And as I think Martin said, this is a movable feast. We can exercise various controls to get results, but I'd like to think that we have our ratepayers front of mind all the time.
Councillor Barrett.
Just a very quick question to the CEO. If we proceed down the path of not undertaking new initiatives, what type of financial impact does that have cost-wise? I know a little while back we worked through the possible 20 initiatives and added new initiatives and a couple more, just so the public have got some idea of what type of financial impact it will have upon us.
Thanks, Councillor Barrett. At this point in time, we're actually talking about the long-term financial estimates. So this analysis is against that. New initiatives would be on top of that. And the current new initiatives bucket is around $4 million. It's simply not affordable. It's not affordable in the current settings, so we would have had to skim down anyhow. And it's definitely not affordable in these settings. I just would like to follow up on something that Councillor Angus said, and perhaps I haven't given a strong enough indication. We can make this work. We just need time. And the best way to do time is, at this point in time, my recommendation would be that if this is what you want, you need to borrow, and in the next 12 months, because we shouldn't be slowing programs. The economic modelling over generations, we shouldn't be slowing down, we should be speeding up. That's what government should do when economies are in trouble. I would never be recommending you slow down. I would at least recommend you keep going with what you've got.
Good point.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Martin. I just want to reinforce that view because it's quite clear that at this point, the only way we're going to kickstart the economy is through government expenditure. So it's a fine balancing act here. If we hamper our ability to either seek matching grant funding or to, in fact, have our own stimulus program, then I think it's highly risky. So it's a nice, fine balancing act to make sure we've got the capability to take advantage of any stimulus packages that come along. Thank you.
Councillor Hayden.
Actually, just going on from there, I fully agree with what's been said here this morning, but I just want to say that I think council is responsible for the way we spend taxpayers' money. And I think the time has come when we need to be probably double responsible. It's not working. It's not working. So I think we need to be more clear about what we're going to spend money on. At the same time, I think we need to be more responsible in the way we're going to bring the money in, and this is what we're talking about here this morning. So I'd like to see us take, and I agree with what Martin said, that we need to, we still need to move on, and it's how we move on. And what we, some of the initiatives we got, whether they can be put off for a while, some that don't matter whether they're done tomorrow or the next year. They can be put off. And we need to think about how we're going to spend the money. Thank you.
Councillor Troop? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, the CEO, just to clarify for me that if we freeze the rates, what will the impact on the big project be? And I mean, we're looking at a 20 to 30 year plan, we know, but just looking at if there's alternatives, you know, do we rely on funding? What are the options when it comes to the big project? I mean, would you recommend that we keep going but with a lot of wisdom? I mean, obviously we have to weigh up community perception in this time. I think that's important. You know, we've got to look at what the community perceives at what we're doing at this moment, and I think that needs to be accounted for. But what is the ramifications for the big project in the long term if we do this?
The current modelling we've done, which is only very high level, is the long-term financial plan continues to be funded as it is. So, yes, the things like the big project have always been dependent on grant funding, so it's always going to be that also a movable beast. I guess I'm optimistic in the position that this council's got itself in, and as a region that is significantly impacted, and obviously the Barossa cluster has made it even harder for us. The flip side of that is that the infrastructure funds that we understand at federal level are very much geared to that, and we're investment ready. So, like Councillor Boothby said, who knows, in the next 12 months we may actually grab more grants. We're just going to have to be flexible. So, the other component of that argument is the ability to go and restructure what we do is not something we can do overnight. So there is a combination of stuff that we can do to balance the cash, but there's enough conversation that I've heard here, and based on the debate we're about to have under 1.9, I can frame something and get it back to you very quickly, and then we can start making some decisions. I know that Mark's already got a model that takes the rates out, and what we would have to do in terms of if we want to keep existing levels of service and capital programs going, what we'd have to borrow or cut elsewhere, etc., to make that happen. I haven't seen it yet because he only did it yesterday, and we only talked about it when we were walking down the corridor earlier. So,
members, I'll remind you we've probably only got about a minute now before we have to return to our normal meeting and following standard procedures. Councillor Wee-Smith.
Just a quick question regarding the big project, given we've just touched on that. That's obviously a long-term plan and very aspirational. Would it be perhaps the time now to have a look at that again, or defer some of the funding that we've allocated there, given that we're looking in excess of 30 million funding to get all of those prioritised projects up? Should we perhaps be just putting a bit of a hold on some of the things that haven't commenced already, assessing that? How would that help us?
Anything you reduce obviously helps the cash flow, but I would like the time to develop the models, and then you can say what you want to do with your expenditure. I think it also comes back to the general principle that the community has invested a hell of a lot of time in putting the big project together as well. And as a government sector, when consumption and private business are in trouble, we should be spending. We shouldn't be reducing. So if we can make this work, and I think we can, and I'll tell you the levers that you've got to change. Once we get this direction, I'll be able to model it up very quickly and get back in this room in a workshop and start having that conversation.
Thank you, members. I think our time's up there. I think just in summarising some of the clear messages that's been coming through from Prime Minister as well as our Premier, our local member and Minister, Stephen Canole, is that, you know, if we've got shovel-ready projects and we're in a position with our balance sheet or those capital works, maybe those opportunities where we can get additional funding, and there's been a significant amount of work that has gone into getting us to this position, and I'm just listening to some of the other mayors from other councils. I think we can take some level of pride in where we've got to. Doesn't necessarily mean we become, you know, sort of take it all for granted, because there is some challenging times out there at the moment. But also, I think whilst capital projects drive the economy, I think we've also got a responsibility to look at our current operating reoccurring costs and put a lot of those things under the microscope as well. It is a different world, and we're going to go into a different world, and there may be some opportunities that we need to seriously consider what we are providing to the wider community, and are they still, in this digital environment, still necessary. So with that, we'll return, and there is a motion then at this stage, the motion that council receive and note the response, that questions and response be placed in the minutes books. Councillor De Vries, and seconded by Councillor Miller. All those in favour? Thank you. Members will return now to CEO.
Just putting the alternative resolution up.
Okay, thank you. We'll return to the alternative resolution pertaining to 1.9, and depending on the discussion, we can now go into formal debate. Thank you. We'll wait for that motion to go up.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can I just draw council's attention to some late correspondence that I received this morning? Actually, I received it yesterday and I flicked it out to you this morning from Mr. Rogers, so we'll put that note in there. And just a clarification that I've added around the clarity that it's about the general rate increase.
Mayors, in respect to what's on the overhead, the motion that is before you is that Council instruct the Chief Executive Officer to develop a budget, business plan and rate policy settings, excluding the impact of valuation changes that achieve a 0% general rate revenue increase for the 2020-21 financial year, and further that the following policy guidance inform the development of a budget and supporting documents. Point 1, new initiatives shall not proceed unless they are legislatively required, address areas of extreme or high risk, or deliver significant savings or efficiencies. 2, additional loan funding will likely be required to support maintenance of existing service. Point 3, based on the above policy directives, Council will consider the long-term impact as part of its consideration of the draft 2020-21 budget once produced, and consider service level reviews, cost reduction and revenue strategies over the next 12 months to address the long-term financial plan impact.
Move that way.
Moved councillor Boothby and seconded councillor Haybick. Would you like to talk to the motion?
So following on from that, our discussion, I think it is unlikely that this pandemic isn't going to touch pretty much every single member of our community in some way, shape or form. I do think that there will be sectors that are more impacted than others, and we talked a bit about that this morning in terms of grape growers, particularly with, as I said, several years of drought and recent challenges, tourism, hospitality, retail, obviously, and I think once we have that information, it would be great to impact that into our recovery plans and our economic development strategy later in the year. I think one of the things that we can do as local government is look at a 0% general rate increase in a really informed and well measured way, which is what we're doing by looking at what, as the CEO has said, what levers we can actually pull to effect that change responsibly. Because obviously, whilst there is a lot of sentiment in the community and more broadly about the way that local government can actually assist, we are a big employer in the region. We are an important employer in the region. We are an important spender in the region in terms of actually generating economic activity. And we have to be able to still do that. The drought funding may or may not help us in terms of that was unexpected revenue that, again, very grateful to the CEO and Mayor for pursuing that, and that may help us offset that. I think that we are being responsible by looking into this in a really controlled way, so I'm just looking for members to support.
Councillor Haybick, do you like to, as seconder, speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. I endorse those comments, and I also put forward what I said before, is that there's so many people out there are really suffering at this time, and we go back to the drought, we follow down from there to farmers in general, grape growers. Now the coronavirus issues have come on board, and there are so many people out there out of work, cannot pay their bills, have no jobs, and they won't get in front for some time to come. So I think we need to be really on board with looking after those people, and a zero rate increase is one thing that I would support. On top of that, I think we may have to tinker the books a bit to make do, the same as everyone else is doing. As Councillor Andrews said before, we need to toe the line as well. So I fully support the motion, and I'm just waiting to see what the CIO comes back with. Thank you.
Councillor De Vries.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not going to speak against this motion, but I just wanted to offer some comments, if I could, based on the spirit of some Councillor Angus's points in the past. I think we need to be incredibly cautious about using the term zero rate increase, because we're not actually providing that, despite what we've been saying at the moment. Many residents will not understand that, in fact, what we're doing is we're simply locking in the same level of collection of rates that we did from the previous year. But some people's rates will go up, some will go down. It will depend on their valuation. And we have seen this in the past, and anybody who remembers Brian Hearn's days here will know that there will be people out there who will do exactly what Councillor Miller said. They will look at their rate notice this year, they will look at their rate notice from last year, and they will see it's gone up by $5 or $10, and they'll be furious. Even if it's only a tiny amount, because that will be seen as a betrayal. And that could be anything up to a third of the residences, maybe more. Also, we're not just offering rate relief, we're basically deferring the pain out. That is, if we want to maintain our long-term financial plan. So, for example, if we forego a 2% increase this year, we're basically, for the average household, deferring basically foregoing $40. But next year, we'll have to claw that $40 up again, plus the 40 that we would have increased it by as well, plus a 0.5%, which will have to be shared over the next 4 years, which means next year's rate increase will go up by $90. Or if we push that out further, then it will go up even further the year after. The compounding effect of this will be significant. People will be feeling the pain. We're just simply not letting them feel it this year, but it will be felt next year. And we need to be straight with people and let them know that. this idea that it's a rate freeze and that somehow this is a holiday, it catches up with you eventually. And that 0.5% will be felt for 5 years. So they will be getting, or the ratepayers will be getting 1 year off for 4 years of a bump. So I think we need to be very, very straight up with people. Also, there's no guarantee that the residential ratepayers will see any benefit at all, because I agree with Councillor Boothby, the people who will probably target the relief towards will be the great growers and those who are in retail, cellar doors clearly, anybody who's in that sector. And I know, CEO, that these are not sectors that, but for the sake of the gallery that's out there, I'm trying to keep it simple. If we give these groups relief, it will come at the expense of other ratepayer sectors, and the ratepayer sector that is most likely to be able to bear that burden will be the residential ratepayers. So it is highly likely, in my view, that every single residential ratepayer will not see a decrease or even a flatlining of their rates. They will probably see a rate increase anyway, and they will be the majority of our community. So we need to be very, very clear when we put this out to manage expectations that when you get your rates this year, you probably will see, if you own a house, an increase in your rates, because it's not a rate freeze. It is simply, we are reducing the amount of rates that we're collecting, or locking in the amounts that we're collecting for the entire community, and we will be targeting that support for that relief. If we don't do that, I think that we would be crazy. The next thing is, in terms of borrowing, I absolutely agree with the CEO, we must borrow. Money has never been cheaper, it'd be crazy not to. In my view, it is not in the community's interest for us at this time to reduce services. Quite the reverse, we should be increasing them. We also need the economy to rebound as soon as possible. We will need industry to resume business as usual as quickly as they can. We know that's going to take a long time. But if we cut back our services, we will not be in a position where we can put any influence over the business community to increase their, or to go back to their business as usual status. The state and federal governments likewise want us to set an example by maintaining or even increasing our economic activity. I think that's really important. The final thing I just wanted to point out is that a heck of a lot has happened in the last month. Literally only, it was about four and a half weeks ago, Australia was doubling every 3 days. We're not doubling every 3 days now. Quite the reverse, we're in fact going backwards. In the past 2 weeks, the active cases nationally have halved. In fact, they've almost gone down by a third, gone down to 1/3. And as of this morning, I noticed that South Australia has had no new cases in 3 days. So to predict where we're going to be in a month would be insane. I have no idea where we could all actually be almost back to normal in a month's time. We need to think about that. So all of the decisions that we're making now need to be made, I believe, in the understanding that this is very early in the budgetary process. We're going to be making our final decisions in 2 months' time, and we have no idea what the situation is going to be in 2 months' time. So I won't be speaking against this motion clearly, because I think it is something that we need to do, and I think the community expect it. And I also think that we should be going out to the state and federal governments and saying that as a tourism sector, we've been particularly hit hard by the coronavirus, but we can hardly go out and cry poor to the other levels of government if we're not willing to also support our community by holding down upward pressure on rates at this time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Angus?
Thank you, Mayor. Quite agree with Councillor Gabrees. It is not the time to necessarily pull back. We do need to borrow money, which is why I'm pleased to see the conditions on that motion. I have no problem supporting that motion. I think it's been quite evident over the last month how we've all managed to do things differently, but we're all still here. And I think you'd be surprised in 3 months' time, we might decide that there are major changes that can happen that might create savings within the organisation, where it may not be as dire as we led to believe. I really hope that the average householder doesn't see a major increase, or even a small increase in their rates. The idea is that their rates, I think, should stay about the same as they were last year. That was the implied intent of my question. There will be some minor wins and losses, but I don't think anyone should expect a major increase. And as long as and I'm still a bit confused about the first paragraph of that. I assume excluding the impacts of valuation changes, but it does include growth. So if someone's cut up a block into 30 blocks, we can rate every block. Question, Mr. McCarthy?
See ya.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks, Councillor Angus. I guess what that resolution is doing is giving me an instruction to go and build a budget in a certain way. You've still got to make decisions about whether growth is included, whether growth isn't included. We will model both scenarios. The intent of that is that if it's a 0% general increase, we will collect the same amount of rates as we collected this year. If you've got more properties, yes, the ones that get cut up, they will still get rated, absolutely, but they're not getting rated on their growth.
Thank you. Councillor Hearn?
Thanks, Mayor. Of the CEO, how do we change this motion then so that it can include growth? Because I think Councillor Angus and a few others have talked about this, and I agree that we should be able to rate these new properties. So can we take that 0 out? Are the movers and seconders prepared to change that motion so that, or do we need a new motion so that we can just include the growth perspective of it? And because I really feel that this is what we've got to do. We're trying to hold the rates down, but maybe with this motion is just limiting us that little bit.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's totally up to you. The very simple answer, in my view, is that doesn't restrict any of those decisions. You've just asked me to go away and develop a budget. Decisions you've still got to make in future.
I think the point I was trying to make is the word 0. People, as Councillor DeVries said, will think that we're not going to increase rates when in actual fact some people will get an increase in rates. So is now the time perhaps to take that word, or is there another word that we could put in there rather than 0?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the resolution is very clear. It's a 0% general rate revenue increase, not rates. It's the amount of revenue we collect. All those other levers, you've still got to make decisions about. And, you know, it's for the mayor to rule, but if you take that out, you're going to change the actual intent of the resolution.
No, I think it's, members, I think it's quite clear. It's giving the ability for the staff and the CEO and the finance people to go back and give us all of the information that we need to have. It does talk about the rate revenue. And I think it's when we get the numbers, the data before us, and whatever decisions you make at that particular time, and then the message we communicate out is the critical one at that stage. That's where we've got to make sure it's absolutely there. But that's the motion we've got before us. You can make an amendment, but...
Can I just ask one more question then? Sorry, Martin, if the revenue is, say, $10 million and you have 500 new blocks and they increase by X, aren't you still dividing those totals into the 10 million?
Correct.
So that's what we don't want. We want to increase it by the percentage of those new blocks. Isn't that a growth?
I've already answered that. The reality is, well, I can't tell you what we want. I can hear what you want. But as I've said, all those decisions still need to be made.
You've already spoken.
Question for
Question, thank you. Yep.
So this is for the CEO. So this is simply asking you to develop a budget. We're not actually determining what that budget will be. We can make any changes we like down the path if we so choose. So the flexibility that I spoke about before is still implicit in this process.
You're giving me some parameters to now develop something quickly.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, that's all.
It's fine. Yeah, it's all right. Councillor Wee-Smith.
Obviously I'll be supporting this motion. I think probably just to clarify, so the intent of my original motion, which might help Councillor Hearn, was to make sure that there was a minimal impact on ratepayers. And obviously, whatever we decide when we get to that point in this process for the budget depends on the value of General's recommendations. So we don't know what that will be, but we're looking at the general rate increase here and keeping that impact on our ratepayers as minimal as possible. I think our council is fortunate that we're in a position where we're able to borrow funds should we need to. But at the same time, I think we need to be mindful of what we're spending money on going forward. We absolutely need to keep our economy moving forward, and we need to make sure that we've got projects in the pipeline that continue that. But I think when we're proceeding with projects, we need to be mindful of the community perception around them, and making sure that it is something they expect in this current climate. There might be some projects that we need to reassess and go, is this practical to be proceeding with right now, or do we need to look at this in 12 months, 24 months' time? I think we need to appreciate that the impacts of coronavirus are going to be with us for a long time. It's not going to go away in a month, and we're still going to be dealing with the impacts. Even if it does go away in 6-12 months, we're going to be dealing with this long term. So I think we need to make sure that we keep reassessing every 6 to 12 months, looking at our financial position, how we're making decisions, what projects we're proceeding with, based on that time, wherever we may be. So absolutely support this recommendation. We need to keep business as usual as much as possible, but I think we do need to have in the back of our minds at all times that what we decide to spend money on is going to be coming under the microscope pretty closely right now. We've got drought funding that I think we can use to get some new projects off the ground that we wouldn't have otherwise. So we can still look at doing a few new things without proceeding with new initiatives. But yeah, otherwise, I think this is a practical solution. It's a no-brainer for me that we should be absorbing some of the impact of what's happening right now.
Any further questions, comments? Not on. Deputy Mayor, would you like to close the debate? Question?
Just a comment. Just a comment. I just really think that we need to keep flexible like the rest of the community and the state government. I think flexibility needs to be the key, and I really think that this probably gives us that flexibility in the future, that we'll be able to reassess it, and I do agree that we need to reassess regular. I don't think this is the climate that we actually become complacent in. I just think we need to be attentive continually, and it will change. I think that we're not going to, we haven't seen the manifestation, especially on businesses. I don't think it's going to be seen for months, literally. You know, people will not pay their bills in 6 months. You know, they might be all right now, they've got a buffer, but in 6 months. So I really think flexibility has got to be our key, which is going to be challenging, but that was just the thought I had at the moment.
Thank you. We'll put the motion. All those in favour of the motion as up on the screen? Carried. Thank you. Move to item 2.1, the Mayor's report on page 12. I guess to say it's been an interesting past month would be an understatement, but it's certainly been incredibly different, as we know, you know, doing things all a lot differently than we have in the past, and I'm sure there'll be some good things come out of it, and we're all looking forward to getting back to what's the new normality is going to be. There has been some good news with Grassroots Funding for the Angaston Oval, $881,000, of which that project has $350,000 of clubs contributions. So that's pretty exciting. Deputy Mayor and I yesterday met up at the Angaston Railway Station, and if you haven't had a chance to pop up there of late, it's still a work site, but you can look and go through the fence. That's coming up really well, and it'll be a great regional facility, not only for our local community, but also for a tourist attraction as far as what that is developing. So there is some really great work still going on, which is consistent with the message of sort of having these projects shovel ready, as we have been. And so I'd like to acknowledge and congratulate the efforts put in by not only staff here, which has been enormous in consultation and all the other things associated, but with the wider community and the stakeholders that have come forward in the manner in which they have. So With that, would someone like to move the next report? Moved by councillor Hearn, seconded by councillor Miller. No questions, all those in favour? We need another hand, thank you, carried, thank you.
Now what page?
We move now to the consensus agenda. Is there any items that anyone wishes to withdraw from the consensus agenda?
We'll move that.
Move councillor Hearn that the consensus agenda be accepted and seconded by councillor Wee Smith. All those in favour? Carried. I did want to comment on a couple, but I've left my run a little bit too late. So other than to say that the Barossa Fringe was great and also the work of the Macolta. So I didn't need to withdraw them. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that there's been some good outcomes within that consensus agenda, those two items. We'll now move to 7.2.1.1 on page 26. The agenda management system, bringing forward the project. Just bear with me while I get to that page. I need to make a couple of comments there. Members, this particular item gives some authorisation to proceed with the implementation of an agenda management system to manage council and committee meetings, deliver efficiency gains, increase document quality, improve reporting tools and better management risk, and utilise the current resources to accelerate reform. Without a doubt, over the years, there's a lot of benefits in the implementation of the agenda management system as indicated in the report. And so with that, that report is there for you to consider and debate. Councillor De Vries and moving.
Yes, please.
And seconded Councillor Wee Smith. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. For the benefit of the gallery, this will massively save money for the council. In the first year, we'll actually go backwards by 4,500, but after that, we'll be saving around 30,000 a year, cutting down a certain amount, a lot of actually staff time, which is, I think, much better used serving the community. And to my mind, this is one of those easiest decisions to make.
Councillor Wee Smith.
Likewise, I think this is a no-brainer. I'm actually surprised that it's taken this long to get this one implemented. It absolutely makes sense, and I think given the situation we currently find ourselves in and what's going to happen going forward, it absolutely makes sense to bring this project forward and improve efficiencies for all of us.
Any questions? Any further comments? Not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Next item for debate is 7.2.1.2 on page 37, which is the move to electronic meetings and variation of associated council policies. Members, this is necessary for council to consider the various amendments and suspension of Local Government Act 1999, which allows council meetings to be held electronically, and consider variations to the associated council policies, including the code of practice for access to council and committee meetings and associated documents, and informal gathering policy. Councillor De Vries.
I've got a question for the CEO. Point 4 talks about that as of Tuesday, 19th of May, we will then be moving into electronic meetings, and all meetings from there on will also be electronic. Is that actually mandated, or is that something that we can choose to do? And will we be locking ourselves in if we have this? Is there an ability for flexibility if we decide that we'd rather go to live meetings rather than electronic?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's not mandated at the moment. There is a small exception or exemption within the health declarations, from what their proper name is now, public health emergency, that allows this still to happen. The whole idea, though, is to manage risk. So the general intent is not to have gatherings. This is a gathering. It's an essential gathering, and whilst we have the exemption, we could be in the room. My preference to manage your health, my health and my staff's health is that we move to electronic meetings. It won't be forever, because there will be a point at which that public declaration is removed, and 28 days after that, any of the notices of the minister automatically withdrawn, and you go back to the normal processes.
I guess you wish, if I could.
You, subsequent question?
The reason I asked the question is, putting it in the context is, as we've talked about, things can change a lot. And it may be that those public meetings rules might be relaxed within a month or two. And if so, are we locking ourselves into a position where we're meeting electronically when basically nobody else in the country is, simply because we've put it in the wording in this manner?
No. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. So if the rules change in a month, we'll adjust accordingly from there, as we have recently. I mean, this is only announced a couple of weeks ago, and we're moving quickly. So the answer to your question is there is still flexibility, absolutely. The driver for me is to be, one, a leader around the health declarations, and two, look after everybody's health.
Councillor Angus?
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate the CEO's concerns for everyone's well-being. But I also agree with Councillor De Vries on point 4. It is very prescriptive that meetings of council will take place by electronic means. And maybe the word will could be substituted by the word may.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor
We
Booth?
haven't got to move for a second yet, have we?
Just to comment as well in terms of overall risk management, most organisations are not allowing their whole entire collective management team to be in one room at one time. There's A and B teams, A, B, C, D teams happening everywhere. We currently have the whole management team of council in one room. So that is a huge risk. So I think whilst the health warnings are still as they are, it is responsible for us not to meet like this.
Members, I think I need to get a motion on this. There's been a suggestion of May. If someone would like to move the motion, then we can get into the debate.
I'm happy to move that way.
And I'll second it, me.
So the motion is as written,
No.
subject to the changing and including the word may. Council may, I'll read that out once I The part 4 is that as from the next ordinary council meeting held on Tuesday the 19th of May 2020, meetings of the council may take place by electronic means at the following electronic location via Microsoft Teams as virtual online meetings.
Mm-hmm.
You've moved that way, Councillor Angus, and seconded Councillor Hearn. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. It doesn't lock us in. The question I would raise is if we need an emergency meeting between now and then, what are our options?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Angus, as they currently are. So we will be implementing as of quickly as we can, but obviously this is talking about a council meeting. We obviously need to get you all up to speed on Microsoft Teams. We need to implement some processes, so it's at least 2 or 3 weeks away. I don't envisage any special meetings. I mean, we have a very stable environment at the moment in terms of our response to COVID, and the organisation is slowly returning back to normal workload. Well, actually, reasonably quickly. I think workshops, and I've got to talk to the Mayor about those, are the next hurdle.
Councillor Hurst.
Yeah, who's on? You're on, Bim. Mayor, I mean. Thanks, Mayor. And I'm just wondering, will everyone have the large screens other than their laptops so that we can see people? I know there's a couple that don't have the large screens, but is that going to be the system so that we can actually see everybody at the same time?
Yes, and you also get headsets to assist with background noise.
Yeah. And just one last question. What happens if, I'm not sure what Councillor Angus with the reception out your way, what happens if one of the councillors goes down as far as reception goes? How do we go from there?
Yeah, as in a freeze or something happens.
Yeah, so you can't hear,
Yeah, I mean, that will be in the protocols. We're still developing those. There may be even need to, just because you're having virtual meetings doesn't mean a few people can't come here or can't go to another office where we have that bandwidth available.
Mm-hmm.
So we have discussed that. We're just still working through the detail. That's why we didn't want to rush as well, because we've seen and heard of a couple of disasters already. So.
Councillor De Vries.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have been teaching using Zoom, which is a similar platform to this at the universities for about the last 4 weeks now. The system can work very effectively, but to say that it is in any way comparable to being in a room like this is a joke. It will be an far inferior way in which we can conduct discussions and debates and so forth. One of the biggest problems I gather with the platform is you can literally only see about 4 faces at one time, so getting sort of visual feedback from each other as to how we're feeling is going to be massively restricted. This is one of the reasons why I don't want to see this implemented any more than is absolutely necessary. I absolutely think that the health of ourselves and the staff is paramount, but the situation is changing. And just to put this in context, I know exactly what it's like to be locked in for 2 weeks, because that exactly happened to me. One of my students actually came up with the virus, and my wife and I were basically having locked in for we had to get food delivered, the whole thing. So I understand, firsthand the implications and the necessity to do this. But I just want to make sure, and this is the reason why Councillor Angus modified the language, I don't want to see a situation where on a technicality we can't meet live simply because a decision was made and there was a lag period. So this at least takes that lag period out. Probably it won't make any difference, but I don't think we'll be rushing to go back to live meetings if there's any possible health issues are involved. But our main role is to be providing the best possible governance we can, and the best form of having a meeting is in person.
Yeah.
Councillor Wee-Smith.
I'm also speaking to the motion. I think we're probably getting into semantics with the use of the word will or may. The only comments I'd like to offer is that I feel as leaders in the community we need to be leading by example, and the clear directive has been that meetings such as this should be occurring virtually wherever possible. I think, for the most part, we're able to do that, and as leaders in this community, we're hoping to actually, as I said, lead by example, but supporting the motion because I don't think it's terribly prescriptive.
Thank you. Councillor Angus, do you want to close the debate, or are you happy to move on?
Enough said, thank you, Mayor.
All those in favour? Carried. Next item on the agenda is 7.2.1.3. This is the matter pertaining to Section 270 of the Local Government Act, internal review of council decision in the matter of Carl Estate indenture deed execution.
Page.
That is on page 69. And the council is asked to receive and consider the CEO's findings, the applicant's submission, and all other correspondence between council officers and the applicants. in dealing with the indemniture deed associated with the Shadowton Under land swap. Members, there is a recommendation. CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a extra letter has been come in from the complainants overnight, and I've circulated that this morning.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries?
Yeah, we're moving to go into the confidential meeting now, is that correct? Sorry, where am I? What page are we on?
We 69.
We have a recommendation there that the matter relating to the council meeting agenda, item 21st of April 2020, item 7.2.1.3, section 270 of the Local Government Act, internal review of council decision, matter of Kyle Estate indemniture deed execution lie on the table pending the consideration of the confidential council agenda, item 8.1.1, titled Legal Advice to Council for Council's consideration, section 270 of the Local Government Act, internal review, and that Council bring forward the agenda item 8.1 immediately for discussion.
Sorry, that's what I thought I'd said. I'm sorry, I must have phrased it very poorly. Okay, I'm happy to move that way.
Moved by Councillor De Vries and seconded by Councillor Louise Smith. All those in favour? Carried.
Does that mean we're now in confidence?
No, you now need to move to go
We
in.
now need to move that we go into confidence. Moved Councillor Louise Smith and seconded Deputy Mayor Boothby. All those in favour, we move into confidence to deal with that matter, and then we'll return to this item.
Good to go, then. So you've got to lift it from the table.
Members, now that we've come back into open council, there's a recommendation that the matter relating to the council meeting agenda of the 21st of April 2020, item 7.2.1.3, section 270 of the Local Government Act, internal review of council decision, matter of the Kyle Estate indenture deed execution, be lifted from the table for discussion. Moved Councillor Johnston and seconded Councillor Louise Smith.
Move recommendation 3.
No, you have to
Sorry.
No. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Move recommendation 3, Your
I'll
Worship.
second it.
Moved Councillor De Vries, hang on a sec, and then seconded by Councillor Johnston.
Would you like me to read it out?
No, thank you.
No.
We can post that on the net, can't
You
we?
can debate.
We'll enter into the debate, and you can talk to that motion, Councillor De Vries.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this process has gone on for a very long period of time. The issue in question was to do with a typographical error, which our legal advice seems to suggest is minor, and I agree with that advice. And on that basis, I'm making this motion.
Nothing to add, but I'll support David's comments.
Any further questions, any comments? Councillor Boothby?
I was keen to speak for the motion. So obviously, the report for this is, as has been said, is substantial. A lot has gone between the parties. So one of the things that I wanted to do for myself was to basically recap on what it is that this is actually all about. The basics of that being that council wants to develop a culture hub on the land adjacent to the Nunda Soldiers Memorial Hall, the regions outlined in multiple reports, for the betterment of our community, creative industries and our culture. John Geever wants, the adjacent landowner wants to do a development on his land that if it is implemented will result in significant employment for the region that we need. The activation of both those projects was facilitated by the swapping of land. We've undertaken a robust process to do that, transparent in the community. The applicants have made it clear by their correspondence that they're not in support of either of those developments or the concept of the land swap. Council, in making its decisions, makes the decisions based on net public benefit, which is what we have done in all the decisions that we have made in relation to this item. The applicants have challenged these decisions multiple times, both to council and to the ombudsman, with investigations supporting the decision-making processes of council having been sound and in line with the legislative requirements. That these processes come at a huge price to our community as ratepayers and to taxpayers of our state through the ombudsman's inquiries. The commercial development by John Geever, if it is successful, will result in jobs. The culture hub will result in jobs. It will be of economic and social impact for us. It is regrettable that there was an administrative error that has now been corrected and has been brought to our attention. What it has done is elongate the process and provide another opportunity for challenge to those decisions. So we as a community, we need to be moving forward together, particularly at this point in time. And I guess what I would be urging the applicants to consider is that overall community net benefit of what it is that has occurred, what council is trying to do, and can we look at, my question back to the applicants would be, for future discussion with council, what can we do to work together to mediate the situation so that we can stop the bleed of public funds into work that is basically not of net public benefit. So I'm very supportive of the motion as put, and would really encourage conversation to try and bring this to a close.
Thank you. Any other comments? Not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. We now move to item 7.2.1.4.
Recommendation 4. recommendation 4.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yes. My apologies. Recommendation 4, that council receive a note that there is a topographical error in the report and the attachments associated with the council meeting agenda on 7.2.1.6 of 28.
Happy to move that, Mayor.
Moved councillor Angus and seconded councillor Hearn. All those in
Just a
favour?
quick question, Your
Yes,
Worship.
there's a question before the vote.
Yeah, for the CEO, has that error been corrected?
The contractual agreement between John Gaber and I, you gave me delegation, so it's been corrected in that, but I have to bring a report back from the Kyle estate to be corrected.
All those in favour of the motion? Carried. Now we'll move to 7.2.1.4 on page 590. This is section 270 of the Local Government Act, internal review of council decision matter of the big project prioritisation and financial modelling. The council is asked to receive and consider the Chief Executive Officer's findings, applicant's submission and all other correspondence between council officers and the applicants as to regards as the application made to review council's decision on the 20th of August 2019 to review the work to prioritise the financial modelling, the big project next phase and endorse the associated plan. The recommendations are there for council to consider and debate.
I'll move that way.
Just before I get moving, I'll let the CEO make a comment first.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. We picked the typo up on this one.
Yes.
In the recommendation and in the report, it's accidentally got 2020 instead of 2019 for the 20th of August. So any recommendation should be amended to reflect that the decision was 2019.
I'll move that way, Your Worship.
Move councillor Johnston with that correction that has been picked up. Seconded councillor Boothby. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Nothing to add.
Any questions? All those in favour? Carried. On page 640, 7.2.2.1, the monthly financial report as of the 31st of March 2020, page 640.
Move recommendation.
Moved Deputy Mayor Boothby, seconded councillor De Vries. Any questions? If not,
I think Mark wants.
if you've got the question, we can ask Mark. If you haven't got a question, I assume you've all read it.
Better move my computer.
Councillor Angus?
As this is the report for the third quarter, I'm just interested that we're only 48% capital budget spent. We're going to manage that by the end of June.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, this is the quarter report for the end of March, and I can provide council with a brief summary of a couple of those areas year to date if you wish, including the CapEx. The capital report is 48% in actual spend to year to date. If we include the items that have been committed in contracts and purchase orders as well, that is at 65% year to date. So that's a bit closer to where we should be sitting at this time of the year, at 75%, being 3/4 of the way through the year. And a couple of the items that are the larger spends, including transport. The actuals there are sitting at 65% year to date with a 78% committed for those areas. And recreation, where we're spending $4.3 million, we're sitting at 50% spend with a 74% commitment on those. So we do have very large commitments in those areas there. And just going back up to the operating activities there, year to date this is on page 642 of the report, Operating income is sitting at 99% year to date, which is tracking very well, and the operating expenses are sitting at 93%, and most of that is made up of the contracts, materials, other area of the operating budget, which is sitting on around 85% year to date. So we are tracking a little bit low on our spends at this stage year to date, but the operating income is on track. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee-Smith?
Just a quick question on the spendings for the big project. Next to the Barossa Culture Hub, it's got $54,000. What have we spent that on in that project as it started?
Yes.
Through you, Mayor, I don't have that information to hand. I can provide that to you off through other means if you prefer. I wouldn't have that with me right here now, sorry.
Ms Thomas, you have that information?
Through you, Mayor, so that is partly the costs associated with the Building Better Regions Fund application, some ongoing documentation work to support the planning application that's currently with SCAP for the development.
Councillor Lee-Smith?
I'm not sure how other members feel, but I consider that's a lot of money that we've spent on nothing at this point. Is there any further spend expected to prepare artists, commissions or anything like that?
Through you, in relation to grant applications, you mean for the Culture Hub?
Yeah.
Not at this time, no. The development approval is still progressing, and the planning report that needs to support that application is about 2/3 of the way through. That's the only expenditure that's currently in train for that project.
Councillor Lee-Smith, subject question?
Yeah, just further to that, I think more a comment. We've talked earlier about being conscious of what we're spending money on in this current climate, and I think that's just something we need to keep in mind. We're going to be spending those sorts of sums of money preparing solutions.
Councillor Breeze?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. The question is if we're going to chase down state and federal government funds and we've been told we need to be shovel ready, the reality is we are going to have to spend money to get up to the point of being shovel ready. So I guess the question is, do we want to pursue grants or not? If we choose not to, then obviously we can make a short-term saving.
So through you again, in terms of things like grassroots applications, all of those applications have been done internally. So those costs are absorbed within the budget for the big project in terms of internal resourcing. So those aren't identified as specific individual costs associated with a particular project at this time. We can capitalise those costs if we're successful in bringing them to implementation. But with the Building Better Regions Fund, the nature of that application, the extent and time and the amount of work that's involved, given that was having to be done at exactly the same time as two grassroots applications, we went externally alongside a significant amount of internal council resource as well to get that application done in time. We literally, I think, had 5 weeks to do that application. And again, because of the drought readiness, all of those sorts of things, that was the basis on which that application was based.
Deputy Mayor? No?
If we were successful with getting a grant for the Culture Hub, would we still proceed under the current situation? Because we've been talking about, because it's, I think, with 10 or 11 million, would we still proceed under that circumstance as councillors?
Let's wait until that time is upon us. I think the message that I've been hearing from the Prime Minister and everywhere else is to have everything shovel ready, and I think that's what the staff have been diligently trying to do, is to have these projects ready. Planning approval is critical, and there would be a volume of work that would need to go into that to have that lodged as such, but I think that's a question we have to decide at that particular time. It's a hypothetical.
Sorry, me.
What your staff are doing are actually implementing the decisions that you've made.
If I'm, oh, no?
Yeah, no, look, and that's correct. We've given direction to staff to proceed with these things, so that's where we're at. You want to change the direction, well, that's another debate for another
Well,
day. Any further comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
This is yours, Joe. You can have the chair.
Item 7.3.2.1 on page 643, consideration and adoption of the Barossa Regional Gallery Committee Resolution, page 643.
Move recommendation.
Moved Deputy Mayor Boothby and seconded Councillor Louise Smith. This is the minutes of the Barossa Regional Gallery Committee meeting held on the 28th of January 2020 and presented for Council's consideration and adoption. No questions? All those in favour? Carried. Members, that looks as if that's our agenda. So with that, I will close the April meeting of Council, and our next scheduled meeting is on Tuesday the 19th of May 2020 at 9 AM. Thank you, members.